Curse God and die. In our last story, we learned about the righteousness of Job. The Lord showcased Job to Satan as an example of uprightness, integrity, and love. Job was truly unmatched in riches, familial bliss, and devotion. Satan, in an attempt to expose Job's shallow faith, destroyed his property, riches, and family. Job stood over the corpses of his children, breathing in the ash from his burning fields, yet still praised God. His faith was unwavering. Now we learn of Satan's second attempt to break Job. Satan removes his health, and Job is faced with his wife and friends who tragically fail to comfort Job, as inspired by the book of Job. Satan stood again before the presence of God. The sound of Job's praises filled the accuser with more hatred and contempt. Again the Lord asked, "From where have you come?" Satan gazed upon the Lord and said, "Walking up and down the earth, seeking souls that may be deceived and corrupted." The Lord once again showcased Job before him, saying, "Have you seen the faithfulness of my servant Job? His integrity and love towards me endures even after your vain attempts to destroy him." Satan snapped as he spoke, saying, "Skin for skin, Job would give away his property and children to save his own life. But if you allow me to touch his bones and flesh, I promise you that he shall curse your name." So the Lord allowed it. He could harm Job and take his body, but he could not kill him. So Satan descended upon Job once again, hell-bent on killing the spirit within him. Job awoke in the morning from his bed. The room was filled with ash from the fire outside his home. He coughed for minutes, and then rose up from the bed. A sharp pain shot out from the soles of his feet. Job fell back onto his bed, looking at his feet and legs. They were covered in disgusting sores. Job felt around the rest of his body to realize he was covered in oozing boils. They were tender to the touch and filled his entire body with pain. He felt poisoned unless he got rid of them, but he had to scar his body to do so. Job's silent weeping could be heard from his room as he took a broken piece of pottery to scrape off the sores. He sat there alone in his room, wincing in pain. Job's wife peeked her head in from the hall. She looked at her husband with glazed eyes. They were red from weeping throughout the night. Job, who had been praising God over the dead bodies of her children, was now covered in sores and pus. She stood at the entrance of the room and said, "Do you still feel joy now, Job?" Job looked at her. He was in too much pain to respond to her. She did not cry. She could spare no more tears. She scoffed at him and said, "You should curse God and die." Her words stung more than the sores. Job raised himself from the ground and walked past her. He limped down the hall and said, "Shall we only receive good from God and not bad?" So Job left to go sit outside and pray. Job sat beside the wall of his home, overlooking the darkness and ash of his land. He did not smile. Instead, he closed his eyes and sought any semblance of comfort from God he could. Occasionally, he would look to the direction of his son's house and cry. Job's friends Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar heard of his hardship and made plans to go and mourn with him. The three friends approached his home and saw Job sitting on the floor outside. They could barely recognize him. His face was dirty with ash, his cheeks were covered in small sores, and his eyes were red from crying. Job sat there, wet with the pus oozing from his boils. His friends said nothing. Instead, they sat with Job looking into the nothingness. Their silent presence was a comfort to Job. There they remained for 7 days and 7 nights. They would eat and sleep, but say nothing out of respect for Job. They saw that his suffering was truly great. The silence was palpable, and none of the friends dared to speak first. Then, after 7 days of complete silence, Job spoke. "Cursed be the day I was born," Job yelled. His friends were startled by Job's statement. Job beat the wall behind him, saying, "Let gloom and darkness consume my life. I pray that the thickness of night would drown me. Why did I not die at birth? To experience joy only increases the pain of loss. Why even give life to a bitter soul like mine? My soul knows no rest, no comfort, and no peace." Job's words cut deep into his soul. He lamented in front of his friends. For a while they sat in silence. Then, one by one, Eliphaz, Bildad, and Zophar began a barrage of explanations as to why God could have possibly allowed Job to suffer such a loss. Eliphaz suggested that God wanted Job to have a greater understanding of how to comfort others, and that sorrow gives him a greater depth of empathy. Bildad and Zophar chimed in with the possibility that Job must be partaking in some tremendous sin. Surely Job is under the judgment of God, or else he would not be suffering. Bildad contemplated the possibility of Job's children being the real sinners, and thus bringing their deaths upon themselves. Their voices continued to shake in Job's brain. Their explanations offered him no peace, no resolution, and no respite from his suffering. The bickering rang in Job's ears. His heart began to beat fast as he listened to their quarreling and speculations. "You are worthless friends and poor physicians," Job screamed. "You think I have somehow sinned? Tell me, what crimes have you witnessed in my life? I have made a covenant with my eyes that no evil thing shall enter into the windows of my mind. Show me a tangible reason for my tragedy, and I will be silent." Still, Job's friends insisted that his claims to righteousness came from a skewed image of God's justice and character. Job sighed deeply, and tears once again began to fall from his face. "There is only one who will speak for me." Job stood to his feet and brushed the dust off of his clothes. He took a deep breath and looked to heaven. "I know that my Redeemer lives. I know I shall witness his faithfulness still." After more bickering and visiting from more friends to discuss the philosophical reasons for suffering, Job departed on a walk to sit in his own sorrow. What he knew of God's goodness did not align with his experiences, and he beat his chest in pain over it. In the quiet of the evening, Job wrestled with his faith in God and sought answers to the question of suffering and God's sovereignty.